This episode of the Lunch with Chris show is brought to you by my upcoming book, 30 Days to Limitless. You can find out more about it at limitless30.com.
This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Welcome to the Lunch with Chris show, where your host, Chris Daly, talks with movers and shakers from all walks of life to get their opinions on important questions. Each season there is a new question and new guests. This short, impactful show skips all the fluff and just brings you insightful answers from great guests. And now, doing his part to change the world in a positive way, your host, Chris Daly.
All right, I am so excited about my guest today. I have been following cycling, and in particular, the Tour de France since the late 1970s. It is my absolute favorite sporting event. Joining me from Uganda is none other than Paul Sherwen. He's a former professional cyclist who raced in 7 Tours de France and has spent a great many years alongside Phil Liggett as a commentator for Le Tour. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hello, thank you, and hopefully you know where Uganda is. Most people in the United States probably don't, but it is, just for your information, sitting right on the equator.
Nice. And you know, most people in the U.S. probably assume in your backyard you have a lion or two, maybe a zebra, but I assume it's a little more civilized than that, right?
Well, yes, it is, but actually, to tell you the truth, we have a plethora of birds. We have most exotic birds in Uganda. Uganda is one of the places in the world where some of the best bird watching can be done. There are more than 1,000 species, which is a couple of hundred more than there are in the United States of America.
Right. So tell me, how long have you been covering the Tour de France?
Well, actually, I was just thinking as you made the introduction, I was trying to add up, and in fact, this year will be my 37th Tour de France, of which 30 have been with Phil Liggett. 7, I like to count those maybe as double because the 7 first were done on the bike.
Right, those are a lot harder. All right, well, let's jump right into our question. The question is, if a teenager were to come up to you looking for advice at the onset before starting a career, what would your advice be?
Well, I think, I'd go back to what my mother once said to me. I started riding a bike. In fact, I started off as a swimmer and enjoyed swimming and then moved into cycling. But I do remember my mother once saying to me the most important thing to do is get a good education under your belt. And that information was given to me, I hate to think how many years ago. I was going to say 30, but then I'd probably be telling lies. It was probably closer to 40. In fact, it was more than 40 years ago. And she said the most important thing, get a good education under your belt, get as far as you can into tertiary education, then you can do whatever you want with the rest of your life. And in fact, the funny thing is I got a degree in chemistry and paper technology, and I've never used it, but it's always been there in the back pocket just in case.
Right, in case you need to fall back on that. That's great advice. So, Paul, tell me what you have going on these days and what you have in your future.
Oh, I've got a mixed bag of things. In the past, I came back to Uganda. I've lived in Uganda on and off for 50 years. I grew up here. I started my sporting career here as a swimmer, and I've always wanted to come back. I'm currently involved with a mining venture in Uganda and also with some oil and gas internal logistics businesses. But my future, I'd like to think that my future will get back into the real love that I have alongside cycling, and that, of course, is safaris. I came back to Uganda in the 1990s to start up a safari business and got involved in a mining business. And now things are moving along smoothly. I'm thinking of getting back into tourism because the further we go along, I think, in this life that we're leading nowadays, the more and more people will want to go on holiday. And the word, by the way, safari, doesn't mean a trip to see animals. A safari is a journey in Swahili. And I'd like to think that my next safari will be taking people out to see the bush and educate them about Africa and the great continent that it is.
Very, very cool. I am. That's exciting. I would love, if you get that thing up and running, to go check that out and meet you in person. Now, I will, of course, be watching every minute of the 2015 tour. Do you have any predictions?
Oh, it's a long way off at the moment. It's so difficult. People start asking you that, as early on as January and February. You have to wait and see how the season evolves. I mean, just recently, who would have thought that we'd be looking at a Tour of Flanders without Fabian Cancellara and without Tom Bonin?
Right.
All kinds of things could happen. After I saw the first big race of the year, the Ruta del Sol, I thought, well, this is going to be the year for Chris Froome. But since then, he's had a very difficult time, and it's his own teammate, Richie Porte, who seems to be riding on the crest of a wave, having had a terrible time last year. So I think, obviously, Contador is going to be up there. He's already said he's going to race for 2 more years. I like Contador. He's a fighter. He's a battler. He'll be looking to get himself, another victory at the Tour de France. But Chris Froome, although he always counts himself as being British, you would not believe how much support he has here on the continent of Africa and how great cycling is starting to be here. Because my friend Jonathan Boyer, who was the first American ever to ride the Tour de France, lives in the country next door to me, Rwanda, and he's doing an awful lot for Rwandan cycling. And let's not forget we got the MTN Quebecer team, who are doing so very well, and they've just won a big race in Italy with Louis Menches. So, cycling is evolving around the world, and, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. Why don't you call me back around about the end of June, and I'll give you an idea who I think is going to win them. But I think, obviously, the logic predicts a battle between, of course, Chris Froome and Alberto Contador.
Nice. I can hardly wait.
And, of course, Nairo Quintana, who went to ride the Grand Prix E3. I was reading through the results, and I thought, no, that can't be true. Nairo Quintana, right? They must have the wrong Quintana. But he went to get up there and check on the cobblestones, so he's a big boy for the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You have not only made my day, but it is just such an honor to be able to talk to you, and best of luck in all you do.
Yeah, well, let's just go back to one other thing. The main reason for you calling me was for the teenagers about to embark on a life and embark on a career. I talked about the advice that my mother gave me from an educational point of view, but then I think what's much more important is to choose something that you enjoy, something that you're passionate about. I mean, my son at the moment is passionate about nuclear physics, and that may well be what he goes into. But I think the exciting thing about choosing a career that you enjoy is it ends up not being a career. It ends up being a pastime, something that you really get a kick out of, and it ends up not being like work. And I always like to quote Phil Liggett, who says, I've never worked a day in my life, because since he turned to journalism, every day in his life has been a good day.
Nice. Very well said. Thank you again so much for being a part of the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
You bet.